All right, guys, so let's make predictions for the MLB playoffs. We know the full field, we know the full bracket, so let's go through series by series and break down who we think is going to be the World Series winner this year. So first wild card round, this is easy. Tigers Guardians. The Tigers blew a 15.5 game lead to the Guardians. It's a great chance for them to make up for that right now. I don't see it happening. Um, Obviously, to blow a 15.5 game lead, let's be honest, most of that was the Tigers, but the Guardians also had to play well. The Guardians are a very good team with a complete lineup, a lot of bat to ball going on, a really strong pitching rotation. They've also got a lot more playoff experience than Detroit, and they probably have the best player on the field in this series in Jose Ramirez, and that's always important. So I've got the Guardians going through, let's be real, probably in 2 games, unfortunately, for Tigers fans. The Tigers need to reassess and reset. I think that team, first time in a long time that there's been a really exciting start to a season for that franchise, and I think they ran out of gas at a certain point in the season. There's really no denying that. It's also a big factor that the Tigers really rely on a lot of very inconsistent players, Gleyber Torres, Javier Baez. I mean, you go through their lineup, and, you got Parker Meadows, Gleyber Torres, Kerry Carpenter, Spencer Torkelson, Riley Green, Zach McKinstry, Javi Baez, Jake Rogers, Trey Sweeney. I think every one of those players is inconsistent. Now, those are far from the only inconsistent players in the MLB, but they don't have a guy like a Jose Ramirez who they know every day is going to get up there and produce in pretty much the same way. Jose Ramirez is the picture of consistency. That's crucial for a lineup like this. That's crucial for a playoff series. And the Tigers have paid for it all year. But look right here. Look at the strikeout rates. This team strikes out a lot, man. And that's trouble against Cleveland as well. So give me Cleveland in 2 games in that series. No problem. That's an easy one for me. Yankees Red Sox. I have this one only going 2 games as well. I actually think this is going to be pretty easy work for the Yankees, and I don't like saying that at all as a Yankee fan. We're playing the Red Sox recently in the playoffs against the Red Sox. It hasn't been good. This season against the Red Sox, it hasn't been good, but the Yankees have been great lately. The Yankees are hot. The Yankees are one of the hottest teams in the league coming into the playoffs. They've got a stronger offense than the Red Sox. They're way more able to put the ball over the fence than the Red Sox are. They've got better pitching than the Red Sox do. They probably have a better bullpen before Chapman. I know Chapman is disgusting, but I don't think Chapman's going to pitch any innings with a lead in this series, to be really honest with you. I've ended up picking somebody different for my champion, but going into today, going into not into the filming of this video, but just into today, I thought that I was going to end up picking the Yankees to win the World Series. That didn't end up being the case when I actually sat here and drafted my bracket. But I think the Yankees are, in a way, in the best place they've been all year. And I think they're going to be able to beat the Red Sox. The Red Sox, getting rid of Rafael Devers was something that needed to happen, especially in hindsight. It worked out really well in hindsight. I made a video about that Devers trade. Getting rid of Mookie Betts, getting rid of Rafael Devers, getting rid of Xander Bogaerts. It's not a good look for an organization that's supposed to be trying to win championships every year, ideally, that they're giving away their best players, clearly for financial reasons. And it's a reason for Red Sox fans to worry. But that Devers move did need to happen, because then you get a guy like Ceddanne Rafaela coming up to the roster. You get a guy like Roman Anthony brought up. You get Rami Gonzalez on the roster. And you have a whole lot more production that people thought was going to be here when this season started. And this team is just in a better place than a lot of people thought they would be. For a team that really felt in a way like it was going to enter a rebuild, but their offense has kept their head above water. Now, they don't have Roman Anthony, which was a big part of that success. Look down at the injuries here. They're missing Tristan Cassis, Marcelo Meyer, and Roman Anthony. They're also missing Cutter Crawford, Patrick Sandoval, Tanner Houck. They're missing a lot of guys. Liam Hendricks, Jordan Hicks as well. You couldn't quite call it an injury crisis, but the injury situation on the Red Sox is not what you would want going into a road playoff series. You can say what you want about team spirit. You can say what you want about the atmosphere around the organization, which is probably a lot better than people thought it would be. But, it's a lot like the situation the Cubs are in. I think the Red Sox and the Cubs are in similar situations in this playoffs, and it's part of the reason why I'm not picking either of them to get out of the wild card round. Spoiler alert. And it's because, they're two of the oldest teams in the MLB, obviously very similar vibes in general, the two best stadiums in Major League Baseball, without question, the 2 most classic ballparks, 2 very similar, loyal fan bases, 2 teams that are essentially in a situation where their fans know that ownership is not spending money to retain players in the way that they should be. So there's just a sort of, I wouldn't call it dread, because the team is still so competent. But just a little bit of dissatisfaction under the surface in the Red Sox and in the Cubs camps, right? Where they're not quite a small market in the way that the Mariners are, or the way that the Guardians are, or the way that the Brewers are. And they're not as good of a team this year as any of those three teams are. Well, the Guardians, but they're not as good of a team as the Mariners and the Brewers, certainly this year. They're just two teams that are supposed to be competitive, that are competitive. But the roster, the fans know it, could be a little stronger, and that creates, some negativity. Now, the Red Sox aren't at home, so that's going to matter less than it will for the Cubs. For the Cubs, that's going to matter a lot more. The Red Sox aren't at home. But this Yankees team I just don't think this Yankees team, with all the bat to ball that they have, with how much they've improved in that category, certainly not striking out as much as they used to a few years back, with guys like Cody Bellinger, Paul Goldschmidt, in terms of the depth in the lineup, and the Yankees' ability to hit home runs deep in the lineup too. It's a little sneaky. You're so used to, especially with Juan Soto, the reason the Yankees went out and got Juan Soto was to cover for Aaron Judge. Aaron Judge has all sorts of cover now, at least in terms of not striking out and hitting home runs. If you want another guy to hit home run, you got Trent Grisham, you got Jazz Chisholm. We're just forgetting about Stanton, Bellinger, obviously, but Bellinger doesn't strike out as much as he used to. Goldschmidt is not a big strikeout guy. There's just more to this Yankees offense, I think, than in the past. And I see them getting by the Red Sox. Whoops. Yankees. So we'll continue with the Yankees' path through the playoffs here. I'm picking the Blue Jays in this series, and it's really only because they have home field advantage, but it's also because the Yankees have matched up against them particularly poorly. They've got a lot of guys who can really hit the fastball. And the Yankees have a lot of starters who are really reliant on the fastball. Now, I know that's every team, but yeah, the Blue Jays are a particularly good fastball hitting team. I think they match up well against Rodon. I think they match up well against Luis Gil. I think they match up well against Max Fried. Nobody really matched up well against Max Fried this year, but more than most teams. They match up well against fastball slider guys, essentially, and the Yankees have a rotation full of fastball slider guys, and to a certain extent a bullpen full of fastball slider guys. The Yankees do have a better bullpen than the Blue Jays. I fully expect this series would go 5 games. I fully expect a lot of games in this series to hit the over. But the Yankees, the way the Yankees could win this series is if the Blue Jays have a great home crowd up there in Toronto, raucous, insanely supportive, insanely loud. They hate the Yankees. The Yankees could feed off that. The Yankees could really love quieting that crowd. So it would be real easy for me to say that's going to happen and the Yankees are going to win. I don't think it will. I think the Blue Jays are going to feed off that crowd. I think a lot of this series is going to come down. I know this isn't a super analytical, statistical take here. I think a lot of this series is going to come down to how well the Yankees handle that pressure of being on the road, right? To how well the Yankees handle that crowd in Toronto. But the reason I'm giving this series to the Blue Jays is because the Blue Jays proved in their games against the Yankees this year, they dominated the Yankees this year in the head-to-head matchup. They proved that they're not going to really stop scoring runs off the Yankees. I watched all those games. I watched every game the Yankees and Blue Jays played against each other. The Blue Jays offense is the exact kind of offense that knocks the Yankees out of the playoffs year after year after year. I say this as a Yankees fan who's watched every Yankees playoff run since 2003. The Yankees get knocked out of the playoffs, especially in the Aaron Judge era, by teams that rally, by teams that can string hits together. And it used to be more so like this for the Yankees, where the 2018 season really comes to mind when we lost to Boston, where the Yankees walk, strike out, or hit a home run, and the other team can actually string hits together. So the other team can just rally and bury us, right? The Blue Jays can rally and bury the Yankees. There is going to be at least one game in this series where the Yankees enter an inning up 4-2 and leave 9-4 or 11-4 down. Probably one of the games in Toronto. And I'm not even saying the Yankees have a bad bullpen. It's just a reality of playoff baseball. Even a great bullpen in the playoffs can get shelled, especially by an offense like the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays love to hit up and down the lineup. They're not going to strike out. They're going to work you. They're going to challenge you. The Yankees have a good bullpen, a bullpen that potentially can be great, a bullpen that potentially can be the best in the whole league. But it's a bullpen that has been tested a lot, but has not been tested in an environment like this, and definitely not in a road environment like Toronto for 3 games. I think this series comes down to a game 5. I think Toronto wins that game 5 at home, and that's why I'm giving them the series. It's a tough choice though. It's probably going to be the best series of the entire playoffs. It's like a division series to quite possibly decide the champion of the world, the champion of the American League at least. Although I'm a hypocrite, I don't have the Blue Jays winning the pennant. Speaking of the team that's going to win the pennant, boop, there you go. Your Seattle Mariners. I always consider how much the bye is going to affect the team. I don't think either the Blue Jays or Mariners are going to be affected by the bye. The Mariners are a better team, I think, than people think they are. I think the Mariners actually are the best team in the MLB. And the reason for that is that I really do believe in their pitching. I think I believe in their pitching more than a lot of people do. But I'm a huge Logan Gilbert fan. He's one of my favorite pitchers to watch. I'm a huge Brian Wu fan. Luis Castillo is fantastic. I wanted him on the Yankees when he was up for a trade, and the Seattle ended up getting him. They have a great pitching rotation. They had one of the best pitching rotations in the league last year. I think maybe the best pitching rotation in the league last year in a lot of statistical categories. And it quite frankly underperformed this year. They walk a lot of people, which is really bad for a prospective Blue Jays matchup. But they have the best lineup in the league, right? They had the best pitching in the league last year and the best lineup in the league this year. That's almost all I have to say. If the two come together, and the two do come together very often to win them games and series and streaks of games at a time, right? If those two can come together for the playoffs, it's going to be really hard to beat them. It's going to be really, really hard to beat the Mariners. This is the Canadian World Series right here, man. The two best teams in Canada, Toronto and Seattle. The Canadian World Series. The Moose Series, the Moose Off. Who can pour the most maple syrup on their pancakes? The Maple Leafs versus the Kraken, bro. By the way, I'm fully aware that Seattle is in the United States. Please don't sue me. But these definitely are the two most Canadian teams in the league. If there were no Expos. I mean, Detroit's pretty close to Canada. The Tigers are Detroit. In the song Don't Stop Believin', they say born and raised in South Detroit. If you go south from Detroit, that's Windsor, Ontario. Detroit is north of like a Canadian town called Windsor, Ontario. If you drive south from Detroit, you get to Windsor, Ontario. There is no such thing as South Detroit. So I guess Detroit is pretty close to being a Canadian team. Anyway, I'm going to stop going on this rant and talk more about Blue Jays Mariners. So many times you see guys have historic seasons and they get bounced in the playoffs. Think all those Aaron Judge seasons, of course, and Barry Bonds in 2002. I'm feeling more Luis Castillo in 2001 vibes here with Cal Raleigh and this 9.1 WAR he's put up this year with, of course, the 60 home runs. I'm sorry, but you don't do that without genuinely being a great hitter. This is not a fluke. This is not an accident by any stretch of the imagination. His Baseball Savant page will confirm that. His Baseball Savant pages from past years will confirm that. This is an incredibly deep team that can hit bombs up and down the lineup. Don't forget about how great of a playoff performer Randy Arozarena has been, man. Do not. Julio Rodriguez has flamed out in the playoffs before, but he's been clutch. Eugenio Suarez has been a clutch playoff performer. This team actually does have a lot of playoff experience. Maybe not together as a group, but they've got some playoff experience that they can draw on, a lot more than some teams. And I don't know, would they have more than the Blue Jays? It's not a disadvantage. I don't look at this lineup and think that they're going to be disadvantaged in terms of grit or veteranosity against the Blue Jays. I just think they strike out a little bit more, and their pitching might walk a few too many, and they're on the road. With all the pressure of being at home, all the negativity that's been around that franchise for so long, I'm going to say that I think it's a case of being on the road is actually going to help in that way. That in this 7-game series, which probably would go 7 games or 6, they would have to play 4 of the games in Toronto. That might help them. And Blue Jays fans, I was going to say this about Blue Jays fans during the Yankees series and the Blue Jays home environment. Blue Jays fans are very high when they're high and very low when they're low. When things go wrong in that stadium, you can hear a pin drop. And it's part of the problem. It's part of the problem, honestly, with Toronto sports in general. It's a problem with the Maple Leafs as well in the playoffs. when things are going right, they get all this momentum. But when things are going wrong, it's so on edge. It's so nervous. Yankee fans know that feeling. Like Toronto with the Maple Leafs, that's the only team where I've seen it like significantly worse. Right? That problem of in the playoffs when things start to go wrong, it just feels like the bottom has dropped out. And the Mariners are, if the Yankees are capable of hitting a couple big 3-run home runs and taking the air out of that building, boy, you have no idea how capable the Seattle Mariners are of hitting a couple big grand slams and knocking the air right out of that building. Cal Raleigh can suck the air out of that building. Cal Raleigh, Eugenio Suarez, Julio Rodriguez, they could just completely shell the Blue Jays one of these games and just get them real, real nervous. The Mariners could get some really crazy momentum going in a series like this. Like if there's a team that's going to sweep this series, Mariners, Blue Jays, Mariners for sure. With the pitching, with the strikeout ability of the Mariners pitching. And, offenses that rely on bat to ball in the way that the Blue Jays do can definitely go cold. And the Blue Jays, not as bad as the Tigers by any means, but to an extent, rely on streaky players. Vlad Guerrero Jr. hasn't been very streaky this year, but he's still more of an intrinsically streaky hitter than, a lot of players in the league. Bo Bichette can be streaky. I just think the Mariners can make the Blue Jays go cold. TLDR. The Mariners can make the Blue Jays get a lot colder, I think, than the Blue Jays can make the Mariners get. If the Mariners strike out, if Cal Raleigh strikes out a few at-bats in a row, he's still going to go up there and swing for the fences. He's not going to get nervous. He's not going to overthink anything. He's just going to go in there, go about his business, go through his motions, try to put together a good at-bat, see the ball, and try to swing at something that's fat over the middle of the plate and launch it. That's a lot more simple of a hitting approach, actually, than I think some of the mental situations that the Blue Jays are going to find themselves in this series. Where you've been hitting, where you've just been rallying, hit after hit after hit after hit, and all of a sudden the hits have dried up. Logan Gilbert's coming at you 6-12 with 99. Brian Woo's blowing 100 past you. Cal Raleigh's got a homer from either side of the plate, and you're down 9-3 in the fourth inning, right? They can the Mariners, I think, can squash pretty much any team. In a way that I don't know that the Blue Jays can, especially if they've already beaten the Yankees. It's going to be a different mentality coming into this series. If the Blue Jays just knocked off the Yankees and the Mariners just beat the Guardians at home, the Mariners still have work to do. The Blue Jays feel like they just, won all they needed to win. So I really like the Mariners in this series. That's my preview for the American League. We got the Mariners as the AL champion. It's going to be hard fought. I've got that Blue Jays-Yankees series going 5 games. I've got Blue Jays-Mariners probably going 7 games. But to be honest, I think the Mariners could really sweep the Blue Jays. I think there's an off chance that the Mariners could just go 7-0 through the American League. They could just sweep the Guardians, sweep the Blue Jays. But let's get to the National League. For a minute, I thought about picking the Reds. Just for a minute. They're a really underappreciated team. They've been trying at this rebuild for a while. This rebuild really started all the way back when they drafted Hunter Green, and it's great that he's going to get a chance to pitch a game 1. The Reds actually have a really nice young core, a pretty strong team identity, albeit with one of the worst ownership situations in the MLB, unfortunately. But the Reds are motivated by something that I don't know any other team in the playoffs is motivated by, and that's the fact that the Reds, it's a little mean, but they don't do that well in their own city. Sadly, they don't draw that well, and I think if they beat the Dodgers, they could really make a case to themselves, like to their own city, to their own community, to their own fan base or potential fan base back home if they go to LA and just run right over the Dodgers. Now, Shohei Ohtani is the reason that's not going to happen, right? I think that this young, honestly well put together, strong pitching, decent bullpen, and really disciplined young lineup that the Reds have could give the Dodgers a lot of trouble just by going out there and playing good baseball. That's really all the Reds would have to do. And, they brought in Ke'Bryan Hayes. In my Yankees trade deadline ideas video, Ke'Bryan Hayes was my first player because I like him as a playoff guy. I like him as a tool on a playoff team, and that's exactly why the Reds got him, to provide a guy who isn't going to embarrass himself in the batter's box, who's going to, contribute to that good offensive mentality, work count, see a lot of pitches, and a fantastic defensive third baseman, and someone who's controllable under 30. And it shows that at the deadline, the Reds were actually serious about making the playoffs and being a playoff team. So don't be surprised if they do something in the playoffs. It's not like the Red Sox where they sold a big piece of the deadline and still ended up still ended up in the dance. The Reds are supposed to be here. The Reds wanted to be here. So don't be surprised if they play well. Shohei Ohtani is the Dodgers' insurance against the Reds, right? If the Reds just go out there and do their jobs, play good baseball, I think in past years, right, 2021, 2022, that Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman Dodgers team, that just felt a little, they were just always on shaky ground in the playoffs, weren't they? The second the playoffs would start, all that hard work the Dodgers did all year, it didn't matter anymore, and they were just on shaky ground from the start. Ohtani is the stabilizer. Not only is he the ace of the staff, he's the best lefty power hitter in the world. He's the best, maybe one of the best of all time, right? And he is just right there in the 2-hole or the 3-hole, stabilizing the lineup. He's always going to be there with the big at-bat when you need it. The Reds are not going to be able, in 3 games, Ohtani's going to have 12 at-bats. The Reds are not going to be able to get him out more than 8 times. Ohtani's going to get 4 or 5 hits. He's going to hit the ball hard. The hits are probably going to be hard and in the air, and let's be real, they're probably going to land in the outfield grass for a double or a triple or over the fence. And it kickstarts Freddie Freeman if he's cold. It might not be able to kickstart Mookie Betts, but it can kick after the year he's had, but it can kickstart Teoscar Hernandez. It can kickstart a whole lot of other people on this offense. And the Dodgers have playoff performers, and don't forget who the reigning World Series champions are. It could be Dodgers in 3. I think the games will be close. I think the Reds will do everything they can to make a name for themselves. I think the Dodgers, it's just too much. It's just too much. This next series was the hardest one for me to pick. I went back and forth on it yesterday and today. I'm really unsure about it. But I talked earlier about that sort of quiet discernment amongst Cubs fans about the direction of the franchise that you don't necessarily have with the Padres. The Padres are more of just, they're a baseball team. They underperform, right? Their fans are unsatisfied because the team tends to underperform. Stop me if you've heard that one before. That's not really as big of a problem, I think, in terms of organizational cohesion is the one that the Cubs have, where there just seems to be a question of the overall direction from the fans, even when the team is good. The Padres can go on a playoff run right now, and the fans will forget they were ever dissatisfied with how the regular season went. And I think to a certain extent, that's what they're going to do. I believe in the Padres offense a little more, even if the Cubs offense is a little more modern in terms of, where you get 3 true outcomes and then you start to implement that sort of strikeout avoidance, right? And there's 2 really great young players in this series, Jackson Merrill and Pete Crow Armstrong for the Cubs. And it's funny because I'm not picking the Cubs in this series, but I do think that they're an underrated team. I think that you could see them get deeper in the offseason. I mean, hopefully they do that and actually spin the way that they should. Hopefully they get stronger in the offseason. They could be a real contender next year. They could be the best team in the National League. They could be the best team in the National League next year. And I'd love to see them win this series so they could face off with the Brewers in a rivalry series. I just think that the Padres are going to feed off of that nervous energy around Wrigley, right, that tends to happen at the start of the playoffs. I think that a 3-game series at Wrigley actually might not be the best thing for the Cubs. I think that this Cubs offense, right, all that bat to ball, I actually think that Cubs offense would do pretty well in San Diego. I weirdly think that the Cubs would have a better chance against the Padres in San Diego than they do in their own park. And, I'm not the biggest believer in Jackson Merrill. I'm not like a big believer in him being a big performer, but I think that he can do well enough to see the Padres pitching through, and the Padres have a great bullpen. The Padres have a really big bullpen edge in this series, and that's why I'm giving it to the Padres, really. I think that's really what made up my mind in this tiebreaker, because this is a close series, right? It's an underperforming Padres team that gets to make a fresh start of it against a really good Cubs team. Like, genuinely, just a really good Cubs team. top to bottom. Ultimately, I'm picking the Padres. All right, so for Padres Brewers, I've been nervous about the Brewers playoff aspirations all year. I think they're a classic example of a team that is not really going to benefit either from the bye or from, your record essentially getting reset. Uh, it's a young team, not a lot of playoff experience, but an incredibly talented team. I think they're a team that's going to be especially dangerous in, the next chances that they have to make the playoffs, even as a lower seed. That's exactly the position I think the Padres are in right now, though. I think the Padres were a higher seed in previous years. They're a lower seed this year, but they're more motivated to get it done. Um, I think that the Brewers are going to have a lot of pressure from their from their home fans, from their home crowd. The Padres are getting, maybe three, but possibly 2 or 3 games in Chicago. Then they're going to have to play 2 more games in Milwaukee. So they're just spending all this time in the Midwest, and then they're going to get to fly back to California. And those 2 games at home are going to feel like a vacation. I mean, I'm serious, right? Especially if they win one of those games in Milwaukee, right? They're going to go back to San Diego feeling it. And I don't know if the Brewers are going to make it back to a Game 5, to be real with you. You're going to have one of the games one of the games in Milwaukee. You've got Freddie Peralta in Game 1. He's probably pretty reliable. They've got a pretty good chance in that game. But then you've got Quinn Priester or Jacob Mizorowski, and it's not that Mizorowski isn't an absolutely sick talent. Robert Gasser as well. I just don't know about the ability of them to win that game with a younger starting pitcher. I think the Padres go back to San Diego with a 1-1 tie and then finish the series there. You can look at how solid of an offense the Brewers have. William Contreras is a great player. Christian Yelich gets forgotten about far too often. Jackson Chourio was as vaunted of a prospect as he was for a reason. And, you've got guys like Andrew Vaughn and Jake Bowers who, honestly really give the Brewers this identity of, patience, lefty power hitting, taking players from other teams who, didn't have success and finding success. That's proof of concept right there. That's proof that whatever the Brewers are doing is working and that it's actually going to have sustained success. So I definitely believe in the Brewers for the future. I believe that, a lot of people are going to pick the Brewers and that they have good reason to. I just think that with all the momentum they have, with all of the positive vibes they've had, there's a lot of things that aren't really going to turn out, I just don't trust them to respond the best to, the enforced break and then a high pressure home series against the team that just beat one of their rivals, right? So I'm taking the Padres. Now to Phillies Dodgers. I've got the Phillies. This Dodgers team doesn't really feel the same as the one from last year. I said, they're the former world champions. They should remember who they are. That's much easier said than done. Ohtani is the Dodgers, insurance policy, and that way he's their stabilizer, like I said. But the Phillies have multiple stabilizers. Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber, a hell of a stabilizer, each of them on their own. And it's a team that I feel like benefits from the break more than any of the other teams that are getting a break, that are getting a bye. The Phillies have had some injuries lately. Some guys like Trea Turner, Alec Boehm, who've both recently come off the IL, are going to get some extra time off. The Dodgers are going to have to fly across country, come to Philly. It's just a really, really tough home environment. Philly's going to get 3 games in their home stadium in front of those fans. I think they can definitely win 2 of those, and then they just have to win 1 game back in LA, which the Dodgers are always a team that has responded in a so-so way to that home pressure in the playoffs. The Dodgers can really prove that they're a different group here. Not that they didn't prove it by winning the World Series last year, but if they really come in and dominate the Phillies, they will shut me up, and I will just start predicting the Dodgers to win until they lose. In future playoffs, in future seasons. But I think the Phillies are going to be a really tough litmus test for the Dodgers, and I think they're not going to pass it. There's just something not quite the same about the Dodgers this year. Not so much to say that the Phillies are different, but the records are where they are for a reason. There is an okay chance, I think, that the Phillies are actually, Just a little bit better than the Dodgers this year. Maybe not in terms of an overall organization, not in terms of how the obviously not with, just money, but this year they've got a better team. I definitely trust their offense a little bit more. And at the end of the day, home field advantage, better offense, Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber. There's going to be a lot of home runs. There's going to be a lot of high scoring. But really, the reason I'm giving this series to the Phillies is that I actually think their pitching is underrated and underappreciated. Their bullpen has been a problem in years past, no longer. Johan Duran, great pickup. Matt Strahm. David Robertson's a little weird, but Orion Kerkering, underrated. Lou Trevino, Tim Meza. There's some depth here. They can definitely get some outs. I question going into a 7-game series against the Padres, and especially how deep the Padres bullpen is, if they're going to be able to handle that challenge. I think they can get through the Dodgers. I think the Dodgers bullpen is malleable, especially against a team like the Phillies. The Phillies can probably mash off of this Dodgers bullpen. I don't necessarily know if the Dodgers are going to be able to mash off the Phillies bullpen as much as they want to. Because, it's far from a bad bullpen from the Dodgers with Edgardo Hernandez, Jason Robleski, maybe even a Jack Dreyer, Landon Knack, guys that don't have the most playoff experience. And, just look at the ERAs. I'll just throw you the ERAs in the Dodgers bullpen, and there's the ERAs in the Phillies bullpen. The Phillies bullpen, you will notice, they have better ERAs. I get this video out of here for you guys. Sorry. They have better ERAs. But actually, it looks like it's honestly kind of a little bit of a weakness here for both of these teams. But it seems like the Phillies have done a little bit more to negate that weakness here. I'm definitely picking the Phillies in this series. I think they have the lineup advantage, they have the home advantage, and they have the bullpen advantage. So I'd say Phillies in 3 or 4. If it gets to a Game 5, I don't think they're losing a Game 5 in Philly come hell or high water. So it's really hard for me to pick the Dodgers there against the Phillies. And Phillies Padres, I am sticking with the Phillies. I picked the Padres in my draft, but the reason I was going to pick the Padres is because of that bullpen. Nah, the Phillies have a deeper offense, especially if Bryson Stott can get some big hits, if Alec Boehm can get some big hits, and most importantly, if Trea Turner can come back and be Trea Turner to go with Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber. Nick Castellanos had a really rough year off the bench, but he can put a ball over the fence. He's always been capable of a clutch home run. We've seen these aren't incredibly dissimilar teams when you talk about the superstars to that classic 2022 NLCS where Bryce Harper hit that home run, and we all know how that NLCS turned out. So this NLCS pick is pretty straight ahead for me. I've got the Phillies in 5 or 6 games, and so now what you've got is a home World Series in Philly. I've been picking the Mariners up until now, but I think about that, and I just don't know if the Mariners have that in them. I'm going to stick with my pick. I'm going to stick with the Seattle Mariners. My computer is, in fact, on low battery. I'm going to stick with the Mariners, but man, is that series going to be great. And I could definitely hear the argument of the Phillies just have that more experience. It would make a lot more sense as, the culmination of the Phillies story over these past seasons of this era of Philadelphia Phillies baseball, crescendoing to a championship after the failures of previous years. But, that's also the case for the Mariners. The Mariners have fallen in the playoffs now at much earlier hurdles than the Phillies. But this is a special team. Sure, they've been on baseball fans' radars, but larger sports culture, yeah, they could sit there and say nobody thought we'd be here. And they've got a point to prove with their lineup. I mean, this prediction right here is proof of sort of what I think determines what makes a real championship level ball club, which is, okay, pitching, bullpen, very important. They're important for both these teams. Both these teams have great pitching and a great bullpen. It's the depth of the lineup, the amount of guys in the lineup who can get on base, work a good count, and put the ball over the fence repeatedly. Guys who, the colloquialism I believe would be, hit bombs, right? Guys who hit bombs down the lineup. The Yankees have that same thing. There's really only 3 teams in this playoff field. Well, no, I actually don't even think the Dodgers have that many guys, right? The Mariners and the Phillies, you can go on and on and on with the guys who they can even bring off the bench, like on the Phillies, Edmundo Sosa, Nick Castellanos, easy, right? Bring them off the bench, another home run, right? The Yankees have that way down the lineup with Trent Grisham. They have that way down the lineup with Jazz Chisholm. But the Mariners have it with like Eugenio Suarez, right? He's their 6-hitter, right? They've got Josh Naylor. Dominic Canzone with an 840 OPS is a lefty. Jorge Polanco is a switch hitter. Josh Naylor. It's a really, really difficult lineup to get all the way through. And, you've got Victor Robles and JP Crawford also here in the lineup. And, a bench that clearly shows respect towards basic fundamentals, and a guy in Julio Rodriguez who's just a fantastic baseball player. Kyle Schwarber, Bryce Harper, they can take all the walks, hit all the big home runs that they want to, and believe me, there's going to be some big at-bats in this series if this series happens between Bryce Harper and Logan Gilbert, Bryce Harper and Brian Wu, Kyle Schwarber and Luis Castillo. There's going to be some amazing matchups between Mariners pitchers and Phillies hitters. But nobody on the Phillies can go on a heater like these guys on the Mariners can. Randy Arozarena gets so hot, it's ridiculous. Right? It's like Teoscar Hernandez on the Dodgers. If I want to pick the Dodgers in a playoff series, right, I can just say, well, I think Teoscar Hernandez is going to get piping hot and the Dodgers are going to win. And you have to respect that opinion because Teoscar Hernandez does that all the time, right? The Mariners have Julio. Julio gets scorching hot. Randy Arozarena, ridiculous. That run he went on with the Rays was ridiculous, right? It's just such a nice mix of bat to ball, discipline at bats, the ability to hit the ball over the fence, lefties, righties, switch hitters. Yeah, the bottom two spots in the lineup, Victor Robles and JP Crawford, it's not that awesome in terms of offensive ability. It's still a righty and a lefty. You still got the mix there, and they're both fantastic defensive players. The first 6 guys in the lineup are all capable of just hitting the lights out. And I think that the Phillies as a pitching staff, they might not give up the most home runs in the world, but they're not completely immune to it. Aaron Nola certainly has been prone to the long ball. Walker Buehler certainly has been prone to the long ball all year. I don't think that any of these guys are going to be trembling in their boots at the thought of a 41-year-old, almost 41-year-old David Robertson. Just a lot of guys down this bullpen. It's not quite going to be able to shut down the Mariners offense as much as it needs to. The Mariners offense, I think, is going to persist, for lack of a better term. If they go down, because the Phillies are going to have the home field advantage. The Mariners could lose the first 2 games. The Mariners could honestly, the Mariners could lose the first 2 games and even fall into a hole in game 3, get nervous in game 3 in front of their home fans, right? They just got to dig it out at some point. They've got to find that hot streak, get on that hot streak, and they're just going to be unstoppable. If they have momentum from beating the Blue Jays or winning the ALCS over whoever they beat, they have to carry that through into the World Series, and they're going to be borderline unstoppable. That's a theme of my predictions here. The Mariners can get hotter than any other team in this league, and they have quite possibly the best offense. Definitely the strongest candidate to be the strongest offense out of any of the top 3 offenses, which in my opinion are the Mariners, the Phillies, and the Yankees. Any one of those teams could win the World Series. The Mariners, the Phillies, and the Yankees. I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if any of those teams win. I have questions about the Blue Jays' depth. I have questions about the Padres' depth. I just don't think this is quite the Dodgers' year. I don't think this is quite the Cubs' year. The Red Sox are in the wrong place. The Guardians don't have the depth. Don't even get me started on the Tigers. They blew a 16-game lead. I think that's every team. The Reds. So that's it. That's it for my playoff preview. Please hit like and subscribe. I might do one of these for the other major sports. We'll see if I'm tempted at any point in the playoffs to come back and edit these predictions. Let me know who you guys think is going to win. Do you guys think the Yankees are going to win the World Series? Obviously, who I'm rooting for. Do you have any big upset picks? Do you think which team do you think is going to go on a run? If anybody was to go on a run, I obviously think the Mariners are going to go on a run. That's not an underdog or an upset or anything. But do you guys have a sleeper pick? And yeah, let me know in the comment section who you think is going to win the World Series, who you think is going to win the AL and the NL, and whether or not you think I'm an idiot for picking the Seattle Mariners to win the World Series. See you guys in the next one.